This week we're in week 2, chapter 2, how crime is measured and who it affects. This week's chapter covers the UCR, or Uniform Crime Reports, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, the National Crime Victimization Survey, and self-report studies. Typologies of crime, victims, the incidents of victimization, and the categories of victims.
I've been doing a lot of research over the last few weeks because I'm disappointed with the data that I've been hearing on the news, the lack of respect for citing the source of that data, and the data I've been hearing from our politicians. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about accurate crime data, comparing that crime data to other countries, and why I think the data is different. So let's go over to FBI.gov and look at the Uniform Crime Reports. These are reports the FBI has been putting out every year for a long period of time. What I like about these is that these are unbiased and that the FBI does not advocate policy. I have a hard time accepting statistics from organizations that are actively lobbying Congress or in some way, shape, or form are trying to create policy. So let's look at the national data for violent crimes. Let's look at 1992. We'll see that in 1992 we had a violent crime rate of 757 per 100,000 and a murder rate of 9.3 per 100,000. Now let's fast forward to 2011. We have a violent crime rate now of 386 per 100,000. That is a 50% reduction in violent crime. We have a murder rate of 4.7 per 100,000. That is a 54% decrease. So what I find astonishing about these numbers is that nobody's talking about it. Our media isn't talking about it. Our politicians aren't talking about it. I mean, we have a 50% reduction in the violent crime rate over the last 20 years, yet no one is taking credit for it. I find it, pretty astonishing. It's unbelievable. Does it not play into their fear agenda? That, you're going to walk outside your front door and you're going to get shot? I can't make any sense of it. And so I started looking at the data even further to see that the crime we do have, where is it coming from? When you start to look a little more closely at the data, one thing you'll notice. In metropolitan areas where the population is greater than 250,000, our violent crime rate is double that of the national average. Our murder rate is double that of the national average as well. When looking at the data, you can pinpoint where the crime is coming from. I mean, you can dissect that data even further and look on a neighborhood level and see where the true trouble spots are. So I want to know, who's working on improving that? I mean, I notice that whenever you try to bring something like that up, it's always a redirect. They want to compare America to another country. America, you guys are always so much more violent than the British. I mean, are we? So let's go over and look at the Home Office. The Home Office keeps statistics that are comparable to the FBI. We're going to be looking at just England and Wales. Northern Ireland and Scotland keep their own crime stats, and those stats are slightly higher. So the England and Wales stats we're looking at will be just a little bit lower. And just to let you know, England and Wales has a population of 56 million. Northern Ireland and Scotland would be about an additional 10 million. So we're just looking at the population of England and Wales. Let's look at 2011. 2011, England and Wales had 762,000 violent crime offenses. That is a ratio of 1,361 violent crimes per 100,000. That is 3.5 times the violent crime rate of the United States. England and Wales does have a murder rate of 1.3. That is lower than the United States, but I think it's important to also look at the overall violent crime. And this is something that you don't hear on the news because they want to pick and choose their stats that meets their agenda. But when you clearly look at overall violent crime, the UK has much, much more than ours. So, less guns does not necessarily mean less violent crime. Now, they do have a lower murder rate, but there's a lot of other factors to look at when you're comparing country to country. And there's one important piece of data that is not taken into consideration. As I already mentioned before, the United States, the bulk of our violent crime is in very small pockets in large metropolitan areas. In the U.S., we have 186 metropolitan areas where the population is 250,000 or greater. In the UK, they have only 32 metropolitan areas where the population is 250,000 or greater. There's a lot of different data to take into consideration when comparing country to country, and honestly, we've just scratched the surface. But one thing I'll tell you is our media and our politicians have not been clear with this. They make it seem so much easier than it is. And there are a few things that we do know. Over the past 20 years, our violent crime rate in the U.S. has dropped by 50%. We know where the crime is coming from, metropolitan areas with population of over 250,000. We know that the UK has a higher violent crime rate than us. And we also know that we have 6 times more large metropolitan areas than they do. All of those factors have to be considered. I feel like our media isn't being honest about this. They're using the public airwaves to spread their agenda and wrong information, Pierce Morgan, as well as our politicians that are already introducing legislation before they even understand what the problem is, Dianne Feinstein. Did you know in 2011, out of the homicides that were caused by firearms, only 3.5% were caused by rifles, and the AR-15 is a subset of the rifle group. Way to pinpoint the problems. I'm going to tell you what. If they want to solve violent crime, they need to put on their boots and go to those neighborhoods and figure out how to improve the poverty level, how to create jobs, and how to improve the education system. That is how you're going to reduce the violent crime in those neighborhoods.
Don't want to come down. Don't want to come down.
Justice for a victim can be everything from a guilty verdict to feeling heard and valued.
It's taking the time to listen to what the victim's needs are and making sure that we can help the individuals that have suffered violence, suffered a tragedy, suffered a crime, that we help them heal.
Seeking justice is ensuring that the victim is protected and that they're safe. especially when they're being removed from a traumatic situation.
People that work in the criminal justice system, they understand that the rights of victims are there. They are the bedrock that tells the world this is what victims need.
Letting them know we are going to help you seek justice, and we're going to make sure we do it in a very survivor-defined way, that ultimately can inspire hope.
When I was 16 years old, a couple of guys came to our door and they wound up hog tying us, hands and feet behind our back, face down on our living room floor. They took turns sexually assaulting my 12-year-old sister. And then they sat down and ate the dinner that my mom had been fixing. And then they shot us all in the back and left us for dead. My sister and I were both able to recover from the physical wounds, and then we started our journey through the criminal justice system and what we think.
Having justice is awesome for healing, but many people don't have that opportunity. So how do you heal without that justice?
If victims are never validated, you lose hope. I realized that there needed to be legislation passed if victims were ever going to be in a place where they can heal from what's happened. Having legislation tells the victim, we've thought about this and we know you need help.
We're going to discuss the case and as we prepare for presentation. Making sure that victims have the right to be present throughout all proceedings, have the right to be notified, have the right to speak and be treated with dignity. All of those rights and more place the victim at the center of the criminal justice process. We have some photographs here and also interview notes from various people in the community. We want to make sure that they know about all the services and that they feel confident that justice will be served, especially in cases of older survivors who aren't aware that there are professionals such as myself and many like us ready to help.
Last year, the department announced the largest enforcement action for elder fraud in our nation's history.
The federal government has helped the elder justice movement tremendously. It really sends a message to older survivors out there in our community that if they are living in fear of physical abuse, financial exploitation, criminal neglect, we will help you get justice. That really inspires hope.
The words officers choose upon their initial response and how they engage with the victim after a tragedy or a traumatic event are critical.
Hey, I'm Officer Blevins of the Chattanooga Police Department. How are you?
The victim has to see hope on the face of the officer.
Victim services isn't just us as victim service providers. We're all in the business of victim services. Advocates work directly with their patrol teams. They ride along on a consistent basis.
Victim services being embedded in our agency means that victim is tied to us from the start of their trauma to the end of our involvement with them as a law enforcement agency.
And then another thing, a big part is I know that there is an arrest made in your case.
It's giving victims and survivors control over the very crime that's taken a hold of their life.
Sometimes cases aren't solved. That doesn't mean our connection and support of that victim stops.
Mommies and daddies, you got to get your babies off the floor because we're going to be doing the hoop dance.
The Red Cliff Indian Child Welfare Department seeks to ensure that our children are protected when they're in their homes, but also to rebuild that family and to give them the tools and the resources they need to become complete again.
The animals brought us the 7 teachings to be highly respectful. Remember that.
Supports in the community have always been a way of Anishinaabe life.
What else do we got to learn?
We talk about respect, honesty, humility. All these 7 teachings we're supposed to apply each and every day we wake up. And there's a lot of children who are just sponges for it. They'll just get up and say, teach me that, because they want to learn and they feel safe.
Now remember, you're dancing Anishinaabe style. Listen to the drum.
Children need to have their story be told when they want it to be told.
Oh, good one.
Everyone has a right to heal and to create a story that is filled with hope.
Crime can have a tremendous effect on people. As an advocate, it's a very humbling position to be allowed into some of the darkest times that a human can experience.
In seeking justice, we're seeking cares and supports to help recover from the trauma.
It's taking the time to pay attention to those victims' needs and their rights.
Do you have a court date coming up?
Ensuring that victims have those rights and that they're respected and treated with dignity throughout the entire process is really crucial.
Ultimately, if you feel that validation and respect, that gives you hope.
All right, that's it. I'll see you on the next one.